Hello and welcome to the Wolf Den podcast. I'm your host Nako, joined by my co-host Anitsu. Today we'll be discussing the top end of the BT8 metagame and the decks we feel like that will basically comprise all of Tier 1 and how those decks do against each other, how they stack against each other, and just the overall interactions that you'll probably see at most regional and high-end events. So, to begin, this last regional, the starter decks weren't legal, unfortunately, at the Carta Regional, which heavily skewed the meta, and which gives us less of the data to talk about that we'd like to, because a couple decks were changed quite drastically, Imperial mostly being non-existent, due to the missing starter decks, but um, at least we,
Esteban wasn't even playable because
yeah,
their deck is the starter deck.
yeah.
So there was zero Mastemon
Well, I
even
mean,
potential.
Imperial Jogress is the starter deck as well, but it's just you could still run Imperial German that's not Imperial German Jogress. You can run like
I mean,
EX1
yeah, you
Imperial.
would basically just play it Chimeramon and then Shikuamon and then go into fighter mode. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not ideal, but at least you could attempt to
Yeah,
salvage that deck.
it's not really the deck that everyone's talking about when they say um like Imperial German anymore. But um
Right.
so yeah, the uh I mean, it wasn't really a huge surprise because Yellow Hybrid had already had some pretty good showings, even with other decks competing for those top slots. But in a world where Mastamon and Imperial Dramon didn't really exist, then Yellow Hybrids was like almost universally the number one deck to take, or at least the deck you're gonna see. And we definitely saw that in what people took and who we played against. Mostly against Yellow Hybrid because it was completely or mostly unaltered depending on the variant that you played. The pure yellow Rapidmon variant was completely unaltered without any starter deck. So
And I just think the Rapidmon variant is just the better variant to begin with. Like, Rapidmon is just such a stupid card. So, if anyone who's listening is unaware of what Rapidmon does, basically it's a Shine Greymon that comes out basically 2 stages earlier. So, it will, for your tamer, suspend up to 3 of the opponent's Digimon down, and then 3 of the opponent's suspended Digimon get minus 5,000 DP. Well, he's already sitting pretty at 6,000 DP as a level 4. So the idea is you play Patamon to be able to delete something with the DP reduction, and then gain a memory, making him cost 3 instead of making him cost the 4 that he usually is. And then after that, you're just basically free to beat up anything that's 11k or less, depending on your tamers. You could even beat up to 12 or 13k with that level 4. So that level 4 is very, very threatening. And it's on a level 4 body. On top of the fact that yellow hybrids is still just super annoying, just because, well, it's yellow hybrids. It has unrestricted healing, and one of the easiest and most generic ways to climb up the stage to a level 6 you could even possibly hope to dream of.
yeah, it brings with it all the advantages of a hybrid decks with not as many as its negatives. Anyone that isn't aware, Yellow Hybrids was immediately very popular at the start of BT7 in North America, but fell off rather quickly, even with it adopting the purple eggs, um, spattering of purple tamers, basically exclusively the BT4 purple Kari and Schwartz Lizards, so it had access to wide board removal. Rapidmon says, well, you don't need to run a 6 cost option that requires an off color to destroy level 5 or lowers. Instead, you can just play this level 4 Digimon of the color you're already wanting to play. Oh, by the way, because it's an armor Digimon, it's a fairly effective poke chip method. Oh, by the way, Cody exists, new yellow tamer as of BT8 that just gives you a memory for having a yellow Digimon in play at the start of your turn. So you can.
Well, it's at the main phase, but
That's what
it's
I mean.
you're
Yeah.
gonna yeah, you're gonna be starting your turn before you play your
So
actual
it
cards
just
with
it
4 memory.
benefits the rapid mon combo, so to speak, because you can then raise your level 3 rookie that you've just kind of had hip pocketed, and whenever you feel the need to rapid mon, you just raise, gain memory, and now you start with 4, blow your board, gain a memory if it's a patamon, or not if it's not, and then potentially swing over said large body, as Zenitsu had mentioned, tapping the Cody because it's a 2-color Digimon, minusing an additional 2. That basically it means that Rapidmon can kill on its own for 4 memory its any 12k body, or trade armor purging, technically not even dying, with a 13k body, which is, most of the meta is 12. Only
Yeah,
a couple examples being
like
13.
most megas are in that
11 or
12
12 range,
range.
yeah.
Yeah, so the fact that that Rapidmon already is just as good as a Shine Greymon was all the way back in 1.5 without the need to actually climb all the way up there is incredibly powerful. Plus, Rapidmon, again, Armor Purge, lets you be more aggressive with the card. It's like, okay,
hmm
I'm just going to start donkey swinging into security. Oh, oops, he died. JK, he didn't. Let me go into a new Rapidmon. It's just, it's just a really dumb card. Like, it's just super strong.
Yeah.
Um, on top of the fact that Yellow Hybrids already has the best recovery game, well, in the game,
hmm
um, just off of 3 memory, which is just a TK or Akari, the new BT08 Kari, just off of one of those sitting passively on the field, you could recover 2 and have a level 6 body to end the turn on. That's it boggles my mind on the levels of just plays that this deck can do. Like it's very clear why it is a very strong deck.
So, as we said, or as I said previously, and as we saw from the event, Yellow Hybrid was the deck to beat in the absence of Blue Imperial Jogress and Yellow Purple Maste, but I I'm already like we've kind of like seen it already from the European results, and I think after seeing just the pool that was taken last Sunday for the Carta event, I don't really see Mastamon existing almost at all in our meta. To like at least a tier 1 deck, it's probably tier 1.5, tier 2 deck, only because it scratches the same itch as Yellow Hybrid and it loses to Yellow Hybrid.
Yeah, I believe we do have the metadata for the
Do you
Carta
have it?
event.
I don't have it, but
I'm pulling it up right now.
I know Yellow Hybrid won, but that's not necessarily a surprise. I'm more determined to see like what the actual top 8 slash top 16 spread was. Um,
Yeah,
I know people that won because that list was released immediately following the event. I don't know
well, they're
their
they're
deck
gonna
lists.
capitalize on it.
Um, but
Oh, here it
so
is.
something that um I guess is relevant
Oh, did he not?
for this further discussion though is just that um I don't think Yellow Hybrid is the best deck in a world where Blue Imperial Jogress actually exists. I at least decidedly not like universally the best deck. I say it's potentially arguably the best deck. And something that I mentioned to Zenitsu, and I guess we'll probably use as I guess the jumping off point to transition to actually begin to talk about other decks in the tier 1 space. But um, I think Yellow Hybrids is the best deck if no one's teching for it. But as of the last event, that's the only deck people were teching for.
Yeah,
Um,
so I don't have the deck lists, but I do have the top 16 breakdown from the Carta event.
oh,
So
cool.
first through third was yellow hybrids.
Mhm.
Then fourth was blue hybrids. Fifth was yellow hybrids. Sixth was Bellastar.
Okay.
Seventh was ancient gray slash red hybrids. Eighth was blue hybrids. Ninth was X antibody. 10th was blue hybrids, 11th was blue hybrids, 12th was yellow hybrids, 13th was blue hybrids, 14th was blue hybrids, 15th was yellow hybrids, and 16th was X antibody. The full breakdown was there was 5 decks within top 16. 6 of them were yellow hybrids, 6 of them were blue hybrids, 2 of them were X antibody, 1 Bellastar, 1 ancient slash red hybrid.
So, um, this is something Zenitsu and I were talking about during the event in between rounds because I mean, we kind of have slightly differing opinions on it. Obviously, we came at this event from either ends of the, I guess, supposed spectrum. I played yellow and he played blue. But um, just the idea that so my worst matchup by far is blue hybrids. I feel from that event. Blue hybrids was the deck that I think competed the best, given the legality of cards, with yellow hybrids. And I didn't even feel like it was a winning matchup. I really didn't. I feel like blue hybrids is uniquely positioned to do very well into yellow hybrids, and even with the new addition of Rapidmon and more efficient tamers and stuff like that, like the yellow hybrids has gotten better. Blue hybrids kind of really hasn't. I know there are some things that it can be done, and I know Zenitsu changed his list a little bit from last set, but I think blue hybrids is still in a very unique position to punish yellow hybrid. And I guess these results show that more so than I like now that it's on paper. I was going to kind of just infer that, but since we already have the actual information, we just can prove that.
Yeah, like blue hybrids is still a really strong deck in concept just because the idea of strip and stun is still very powerful, and there's a lot of decks that are like prone to be weak against it. And this event, more specific than any of the other BT8 events, is going to have a really good and strong blue hybrid showing because of that. Like, you don't have a whole lot of DNA digivolves to be able to get out of the stun from blue hybrids. Yellow hybrids still has a hard time interacting with blue hybrids because they're a hybrid based deck, and you're just playing tamers, and they have 0 outs to you just literally playing tamers. So you're just basically playing this efficiency game where it's just like who gets to the most amount of memory first to be able to make the most crazy amount of power plays. And usually it's a race between them, and I think blue hybrids, with just blue having a better draw engine than yellow, has a slight advantage on that. I still think, unfortunately, you do have to rely on a Zulong to punch really hard into the opponent's security, although it sucks because their security is actually better now than in the previous set, on top of Rapid Bond stopping the ability to just sit forever on your floodgate cards. Um, so it forces you to be a little bit more aggressive with your floodgates. Um, so it's probably the better of the decks to go into yellow, but it's not like a free win by any stretch of the word. It has a really good matchup on a lot of other decks too. I just think the deck really struggles with anything that has a bigger stack than what it can constantly strip. So in my personal experience, I had a very hard time with Wargrey, more specifically Wargrey that was playing with Chimeramon. I think that just blows blue hybrids out of the water, just because they can make big stacks. Once they get into their big boss, you literally cannot touch that outside of just trying to strip it down and trying to stun lock it, and then cool, they just build up again. Like, it just has efficient removal to make your floodgates kind of mediocre, while also popping your tamers, while also having a good blocker, while also being able to build up a good stack. Like, it does have its bad matchups.
Hmm. Um,
Not saying Wargrey is really good. He's really good into blue hybrids, but I don't think he's that great into various other matchups.
yeah. So where I was going to go with that though is just the idea that so for this event, I think blue hybrids was probably the best it will be this format because while it has a very strong yellow hybrid matchup, and yellow hybrid was kind of like the deck to beat unrefutably this this event. That becomes less so the case moving forward, and as Zenitsu had mentioned, I think other decks can take advantage of blue hybrid in ways that yellow hybrid cannot. So you almost form this rock paper scissors meta with yellow beating other decks, but getting beat by blue hybrid, who then gets beat by decks that can't beat yellow hybrid. So in a meta where Imperial is something people need to worry about, Mastamon is kind of a thing people need to worry about. Um, just I guess maybe a slightly more efficient Armor Rush too, with access to Pyildramon and Megadeth. Um, those decks are the ones that will actually prey on blue hybrid with like basically just Jogress A, but also Wargreymon's ability to like remove tamers moderately efficiently in ways that they don't necessarily punish yellow as much for.
Yeah, because yellow usually gets off their important tamers really quickly to just blanket recover, sit on a Digimon, and just poke the opponent. And that's kind of like how yellow wins, is like you either poke the opponent to death, or you're lucky enough to set up 7 memory off of your tamers to Susano and have a really big and easy punch.
Mm.
Um, like that is just how yellow hybrids wins. But I think like also Ophanimon Fall Down for yellow hybrids is a huge step up compared to all of the other blanket recovery cards. Like sure, Seraphimon can still have security tech +1, which is
It's a
not
10k body
irrelevant.
though.
Yeah, the 10k body makes it kind of medium. I
Well,
mean, granted,
in
it's still good. It's just Ophanimon, the fact that you have a sticky body to do various other things with, just make it a little bit more desirable.
well, so um, originally I was leaning more towards Seraphimon because it evos for 3, it still recovers 1. You're never going to get both benefits of Ophanimon because you're running pure yellow hybrid. You're not running any purple sources, so you're never gonna delete an opponent's level 4 Digimon. It digivolves for 4, which doesn't feel as good if you don't have 4 memory to start with. Obviously, that technically costs 6 if you and your opponent only have access to memory tamers. You starting at 3, giving them 1, they go to 3. Like that's a really expensive digivolution, and it's also why previously, or at least in prior metas, like anything that cost 4 or 5 without some other way to change that value, it made the card almost dead on arrival because it had to have a like significantly impactful digivolution skill to be worth passing your whole turn for that one ability without being able to do anything else. But I think the real nail in the coffin for Seraphim on this format is just the existence of fighter mode. When digivolving, return an opponent's Digimon with 10k DP or less to its owner's hand. Like, makes Seraphimon completely unplayable. You can't you can't have your opponent's level 6 agnostically remove your level 6 while they gain tempo by making a level 6.
I also feel like just the 10k body, yeah, just the 10k body is just super weak if the opponent has the ability to remove it easily, which in the way Digimon is currently being played, they should.
I mean,
Um,
Chimeramon can swing over it most often. Like, there's just
I
it's
mean,
too small for a 6. It's too small.
just just also the fact that, like I stated before, Ophanimon's 2 colors, so if you're already playing Cody with Rapidmon, then Cody also works with Ophanimon, which gives
That's
it
true.
another reason to be in the deck. On
Mhm.
top of the fact that sticky body, sticky bodies are usually really really good
Yep.
because now they're gonna have to basically kill that Digimon twice. Um, and some decks just can't do that. And then you could use that body to do various other things like continue the aggression, go up a new chain, what be it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I think Ophanimon is just de facto the best level 6 that they currently have. Plus 12k is still not irrelevant. It chips very easily and very well, and it forces the opponent to respond to it.
Mhm.
And if they don't, then you just Susano on top, or Susano over a hybrid. Um, like by hybrid, I mean
Tamer.
Tamer.
Yeah.
Um, and you're still rocking it. Like it's just a very strong deck.
So, um, it isn't, or at least I guess it's kind of set based on the results so far. Um, so if we had to nail a third deck competing, I would say X Antibody is probably in that space right now. Um, kind of not necessarily like closer to tier 1.5 territory, but I would still say tier 1, especially because it being a black deck, it is also uniquely positioned to beat yellow hybrid. Um, I had a very difficult matchup against an X antibody opponent who just continuously cycled cannot be reduced or cannot be DP reduced effects between the when digivolving of Doru Greymon and Breath of the Gods. So um, that's
Yeah,
they
they
only
just
need a
need to
couple
keep a
turns to
body.
win, even with the recovery of Yellow Hybrid. Like, but its recovery isn't as, I guess, it's still efficient, it's still good, but it's not. We're not talking security control levels of recovery. We're not talking old Yellow Hybrid levels of recovery. My security is fairly static as far as I'm not changing my security amount outside of me playing something to recover. So I don't you don't play Holy Wave anymore. You don't play Tactical Retreat anymore. So you're not going to swing into my 6 security and then have me still have 3 left over because you hit 2 Tactical Retreats in a Holy Wave. Like that kind of situation's gone now. You can still hit Tamers, which still give me resources in alternative ways, but if I never get to use that Tamer because you win, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like that's why like if yellow hybrids is unable to deal with a large body that can hit very hard, they do kind of just crumble, and they're still sort of slow enough where they give the opponent enough time to do that. And in Black X Anybody's case, if they literally just can't remove that body, then that body is just going to end up winning you that game.
Mm,
And the effects that just make it so that they can't be DP reduced greatly impacts like its performance against yellow hybrids. I think Breath of the God is also really good against stuff like blue and Imperial because it also stops bounce effects. So it shuts down cards like Megadeth. Megadeth is
yeah.
so good.
Megadeth was
Like
also absent from this event. I did play against an opponent who was running Armor Rush who substituted Megadeth for Gigadeath, which was hilarious because it's so bad comparatively.
I do not think Giga Death is
Uh,
good. If anything, I would have substituted with
like Cocytus,
Plasma Shot. No, Plasma Shot.
Plasma Shot, that doesn't bounce anything.
No, it would straight up kill it
A
if
level
you're
6?
like
You're not killing a level 6 with that.
I mean, you
Not
could.
wholesale. You need something.
I mean, you would attack into it. Yeah.
Yeah,
You would attack into you would reduce it and attack into it, sure.
yeah.
Um
Both
But
times they
like
played the.
it also is good against other matchups too because it DP reduces the board. Like
Yeah.
that's the important part. Like if they are just sitting on a field of like rookies or level fours, it and you just have four um armors in your trash, which isn't hard, like you could clean up a field. And that's not an irrelevant factor.
Mm. So, um,
But I mean obviously yes, Megadeth is better.
yeah. Just that big change itself, I think, will make Armor Rush a little bit better too. I just um. So I guess the real theme here is that for like the tier one discussion and the tier one competition for this meta is can you answer the questions asked of you, of your deck, by the meta decks? If you're the little guy, what tools do you have to fight against the big guy? And something that's, I think, why, even though on paper, a very strong, upgraded version of Rookie Rush in the form of Armor Rush, especially because they have access to, um, I guess, just as many crazy Pyldramon turns as Imperial Dramon does itself, because most of the armor Digimon are also free, right? Yeah, all of them I think are free, because
Yeah, they're all
still
free attributed.
they still come from Vmon. Um, so
Well, even the Hawkmon line and the Armadillomon line, they're also all free attributed.
yeah, so if you somehow are running Halsamon in your Armor Rush deck, you can still do something crazy with it. But um, kind of I guess what I was getting to was the idea that Armor Rush just cannot answer Yellow Hybrid, though. Yellow Hybrid's existence makes Armor Rush a very sad place to be, because its whole gimmick, its whole mechanic of Armor Purge is irrelevant, with DP minus being the outward form of removal that yellow hybrid runs, especially Rapidmon just actually wholesale clearing your board. Um, and it also interacts negatively in other ways too, because minus DPs are blanket holdover effects. So if I, um, you know, you swing into security and I hit you with a DP minus that doesn't actually kill said Digimon, if it then hits something and dies, that DP minus carries over, and now your Vmon dies anyway.
Yeah, like just DP minus in general is already kind of dumb because the game is killing the Digimon. Like
Mm-hmm.
it is a debuff, not an actual kill. And because it's a debuff, the game treats it differently than every other form of removal, which makes it even stronger than all of the other forms of actual removal. Um, but like that's why blue uses like bounce effects because there's not a whole lot of protection against bounce effects. Blue hybrids uses stun, but the only thing that gets you out of stun
Is
right now
Jogras.
is DNA. Um, so that's like just the existence of DNA just makes blue hybrids worse. Like
Mm-hmm.
just already a Chimeramon, just a one Chimeramon can already screw over blue hybrids in such a huge way. It's almost comedically sad.
Yeah.
Um, and I think like while I do like what Blue Hybrids was trying to do, I don't think it's in that tier 1 category. I think it's more of a gatekeeper where it's just like
Hmm.
it'll still be around to prey on the decks that don't have the ability to fight it off. Um but if you do have the ability to fight it off, then it's not even really a match. Like Imperial just runs right over Blue Hybrids because it's faster than it in terms of its aggro gameplay. And then
It gets
Blue
around its
Hybrids,
primary
yeah,
stalling mechanic.
yep. So your removal is basically irrelevant. And then like just Jogras in itself, like if you just make a huge power play, Blue Hybrid's got nothing for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like sure, you might be unfortunate enough to hit Hammer Spark in security. That's like about the worst thing an Imperial Dramon player has to think about going into Blue Hybrids.
Hmm.
Is there Hammer Spark in security? If so, how many?
Yeah. Um. So yeah, with that, like I would definitely say blue hybrids is decidedly tier 1.5 again. But probably mostly like just the floor and ceiling of two. I guess floor of the meta decks and the ceiling of tier two, and it 100% gatekeeps that line, and it holds that line with its life. It will. It probably has a losing matchup against most of the tier one space. We already mentioned how it does have a kind of a better matchup in the yellow hybrid, but um, not not a positive win rate enough to justify its way worse matchups against the others in the space. And but blue hybrids will still run a train on anything below it.
Yeah.
It keeps everything out to the point. I mean, not that the other decks in the tier one space don't do that, but it it really does thrive in that environment of okay, let's ban 3 decks off the top of the meta, and blue hybrid becomes potentially the best deck in the meta now.
I mean, that's just the byproduct of what Blue Hybrids was trying to play with because it's also a hybrid based deck.
Hmm. So,
I
um,
mean, and that's not necessarily a problem because, like, usually the way they design sets or like think of problem solving in terms of like the problems they make because they made the cards so they make the problems. Usually the answer is always in the next set. So like right now, I do unfortunately think that with the success of yellow hybrids having a vast amount of toppings, on top of just the overall perception of the deck, and people for whatever reason in English love control. They just love control. That's going to cement yellow hybrids as probably the best deck in the deck to beat. Um, and that's kind of a problem. So in BT9, they kind of introduce a little bit extra aggro cards to really try to help push that forward. To at least give people the ability to fight back against it. Just as an example. So now we're seeing that with blue hybrids falling off now because DNA and Jagras is a thing to get rid of the stun, continue the aggression, basically make everything that they were doing irrelevant.
hmm,
And Mastimon is another deck that fits in that space while also having really good levels of control and a very wide toolbox of things that it can do. So it plays Magna Angemon that could recover. It plays Lucimon that could kill Digimon and Tamers. You have Angelomon that could basically stun the opponent's Digimon with Security Attack minus. So, like, you already have a wide variety of tools that you're playing with to be able to handle various different situations. And I think Mastimon is definitely a deck that should not be slept on either as another, like, really good tier one contender. So, I would say, like, the three decks you should be afraid of the most would probably be Mastimon, Yellow Hybrids, and Imperial. Mastimon being like the mid-range toolboxy kind of deck, Yellow Hybrids obviously being more of the premier control stall, and Imperial taking up that aggro space.
See, now I think I disagree with you there. Not to like a huge extent, but for I guess a couple different points. One, I would my biggest disagreement I feel would be that I don't think yellow purple Mastamon is a like mid-rangey toolboxy deck. If anything, I think its problem is that it's actually still slower than yellow hybrid, which is why it loses to yellow hybrid. Because
I
yellow
mean,
hybrid still manages to be faster than a deck whose premier element is to slam a level 5 for a large amount of memory, then end of turn Jogress.
it's not ideal, but I do think like a correctly built Mastimon could go very, very far. Like it has the tools to perform relatively well and strong against virtually any deck because of its wide toolbox. And like it's doing stuff that Yellow Hybrids kind of wishes it can do, and it actually has a game plan to win the game more often than just trying to chip stall and hope Susano is there and playable. So, like, yes, Yellow Hybrids is a faster control deck overall. I still think a Mastimon deck against it could do very, very well. It also depends on like how the flows of the games go, because like Yellow Hybrids can stall a little bit too much, and if they're unexpecting a Mastimon play, Mastimon can still just come in and wreck shop. And then if they can't
Mm.
get rid of said Mastimon because she's 13k, and they'll have a little bit of a harder time doing that, outside of like a wyvern's breath, then what are they going to do?
Well,
Like, Mastimon's
so
just going to gain value because you also are spawning another level 5 body when you go into Mastimon as well.
yeah, um, that's a 6K body, which is just easy Eden's fodder. But I mean, you're passing a turn
Well,
anyway.
or Lucimon, which is a 10k body, kill your tamer, kill your Digimon, take your
Mm.
pick.
Um,
Or, yeah, kill
yeah,
your tamer, or kill your Digimon.
I think Mastimon's biggest problem though, and why I would say it's not necessarily contention for tier one decidedly, definitely not top three. Depending on how wide you would potentially just like define tier one. Um, but um, I think it suffers from success almost in that I think Yellow Hybrid uses its toolbox, not necessarily engine, but its toolbox better than it does, mostly in the form of chaos degradation, almost exclusively in the form of chaos degradation. Um,
Yeah, you wouldn't play anything else from the Mastimon stuff. It's
but
just not worth it for Yellow
I
Hybrid.
think I think what you are perceiving as a spot for Mastamon in the tier 1 space, I think is just yellow purple hybrid. Non pure yellow hybrid, I think is another deck that's not yellow hybrid and different enough to warrant its own separate slightly lower spot.
I mean, I the big thing that I'm thinking about on why I think Mastimon is tier one is also its representation. The fact that it comes in a starter deck and there's a wide variety of ways to build the deck is very appealing for a lot of players. Like they could just spend $30, get two of the starter decks, and then have a couple of like solid upgrades. And it's still a very strong and competent deck just because the majority of the core is in that starter deck.
Yeah, but I mean,
I mean, to really make it like good, you'd have to shell out probably more money than most other decks in the entire game combined. But regardless,
I was gonna say that, like, cause yellow is fairly expensive, especially the yellow control elements. Like, Magna Angemon is not a cheap card, and you need four of them. Um,
You don't need four of it. You could get away with two.
eh, but I guess more so that applying, I guess, your own logic forward a little bit. Why would I buy two Mastamon starter decks to build a Mastamon deck that I need to retain some fairly expensive upgrades when I could just buy two Imperial Dramon starter decks, build Blue Imperial, and run a train on everybody?
I mean, that's the better option, yes, but Mastamon also has longevity in various other sets. Um, just because they're playing with some very like in BT9, not getting like too far ahead in terms of like card pool. Um, but they do have more support for yellow purple as a whole for more specifically that Mastamon style of approach with Ordenmon,
Or
I think.
Danimon?
Yeah, or Danimon.
Yeah. Um,
So like there still is a reason, and it's not like those cards are going to be super hyper expensive as what we're currently using now.
hmm. I I don't disagree with that, but I also wouldn't necessarily use that as like a point towards any deck. I don't think current meta playability has anything to do with the future proofing of a deck because
Well, I mean,
we
so in
already
like
change decks and change metas so frequently with very few if any decks really retaining that like tier 1 spot longer than a single set. So I can't see anyone really thinking that far forward where they're like, "Man, 2 sets from now, this starter deck's going to be usable."
I mean, yes, but like it's still a strong solid deck. Like
Yeah,
blue hybrids would still
I would
struggle with a starter deck Mastimon,
I think
just as an example, and
Mastimon's just
that's
more
supposedly the
in the
tier 2
like
gatekeeper.
Mastimon's just more of the like slightly below X antibody, probably like decently above. I think there's a wider gap, but like Black War Greymon. Like I would go like yellow hybrid slash Imperial depending upon the meta, depending upon what people are teching for. Because I guess as we stated before, I think yellow hybrid's the best deck when no one is teching against it. But because it is such a deck that it has enough tools to be teched against, and um, other decks have at least options to deal with it, they will then play those options. Especially in the form of X antibody, obviously, where Breath of the Gods hits both ends. It counters Mega Death and Wyvern's Breath. So
On top of shutting out aggro if it's tripped in security.
yeah. Um, so I would really say that X antibody is probably at least the third deck if we're talking about three. Um, if we're stretching to four and we're not counting yellow purple hybrid as its own deck, then I would I guess include Mastamon.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's still yellow hybrids. You're doing the ABCs. You're gonna slam tamer. You're gonna recover for going up the chain, and then yeah, like it's just your
So
tamer lineup is different, and your removal is different, and that's the major differences.
hmm, I don't want to spend the whole episode talking about yellow hybrid, but at the same time, we do just have less data for Blue Imperial. So as much as I really do want to talk about Blue Imperial, and I know you really want to play Blue Imperial, I have not played against it at all. Um, but based on
It's so gross. That deck is so good. I don't like blue hybrids, and part of my disdain is because it's not really like the most traditional sense of an aggro deck. I just want to turn cards sideways, and blue hybrids take so long for me to turn cards sideways that it's like, I'm not quite feeling that. Um and Imperials always turning their cards sideways.
hmm, um, I think yellow hybrids at least has an option to deal with Imperial. Like I said, I mean it technically did win the event in EU, the singular event that had Imperial legal. Um, there hasn't been any in North America
Oceania.
yet. Um, yeah,
There was Oceania.
yeah, I know. Did it win that? Who won that event? Blue?
Uh, I wasn't it? No, Imperial won EU and Oceania was yellow hybrid.
Nope. The yellow hybrid won you.
Oh, then it
Is
was
the other way
Imperial
around?
that won
Yeah.
Oceania.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair. Um, so it, but that being said, that was so yellow hybrid gets nothing from the starter decks. They weren't legal for Carta. Um, that changed the way that people made. It changed my yellow hybrid list for sure. I had to change a couple things, mostly because I had to play or tech to beat either other yellow hybrids or blue hybrids, more so than play tech to beat Imperial. Um, One big thing that I noticed immediately through our playtesting was that yellow hybrids not having or because blue hybrids plays those floodgates and Imperial just doesn't. Imperial doesn't care about preventing you from gaining memory with cards like that because they just beat face. Um, and
They also don't have the deck space for
yeah,
it.
their engine's too tight as it is. You need to run all VMons in your rookies. You can't afford to run a bunch of floodgates. Um, so but yellow hybrids like certain cards struggle in that matchup. Um, and having played against like I mean they kind of saw the cards they needed to see, but an ex antibody player who also cycled cannot be DP reduced effects to the point where they won me out. Um, I think we then just see an evolution potentially in North America at least of um starting from that like EU nationals winning list of pure yellow, 4 Rapidmon, 4 Edens, 3 Wyvern's Breaths, a bunch of Tamers. I think I know I was talking with Zenitsu about it after the event and a little bit earlier this day because um, I haven't played with it and I only have some like vague ratios in my head of like what I would change, but I do think while for that event I think Yellow Purple Hybrid was worse. I think if everyone is teching around DP minuses, the easiest thing yellow hybrids can do is to switch to yellow purple and at least dip their toes in the water enough to adopt chaos degradation, potentially just over Wyvern's Breath completely, and then um, there's no getting around that. Shield of the Just doesn't stop that, so or not Shield of the Just. I keep saying that. Breath of the Gods.
Yeah, I mean nothing gets around that
Literally
removal,
nothing stops it, and it
which is the
costs the
silly part.
same. It costs the same, and I mean you have at least the option of playing it and then not trashing said big card you're probably tucking to their security. Um, you know, if you really wanted to be a gambler at least or make it matter less, you could potentially tuck their big bad, I guess, or in this, you're tucking the level 6x antibody into the bottom of their security and then still trashing the top card of their security, just knowing that the bottom card of their security will be something that will kill something, but that usually doesn't matter a lot, especially against a hybrid deck. If my Susano swings for 3 checks and they have 3 security and it dies on the third check, I can still hybrid for game. So
I mean, yeah, Chaos Degradation is just a really strong card in general.
that's really, I guess, what I see. I don't know if I'm right or not. I'm not as confident in that prediction. Um,
Well, the thing we have to realize is, as of right now, the competitive events we have two more regionals coming up this weekend, and then we have some in-person regionals, but like literally EX2 is just around the corner and that's going to shift the meta. Like there is actually good cards that are going to have a ginormous impact on the meta. Maybe not as much as a full set of cards because it's a extra set. Um but it'll definitely shake up things way more than Classic Collection did. Classic Collection was almost a joke compared to Digital Hazard
yeah, it just made blue Gabuban better and basically nothing else.
and introduced Machine Dramon, which wasn't really that playable. I mean, it was a good deck.
It's
It
always
still
been
is
a
missing
meme deck.
pieces. Yeah, it's The problem is it's still missing pieces and it won't get those good pieces till later, and then there's just better stuff to play by the time it
Yeah,
actually got what it needed.
the world
Like,
is like, Machine Dramon is just unfortunately it's a bike when everything else a motorcycle. Like it's just you're getting there. It's just you're not nearly as like everything else is getting better around it. It's like the
I mean, it's
fucking
still a
house
good
from Up.
deck.
Yeah, it's the house from Up though. You know, there's a
I
skyscraper
know.
next to you.
I know.
Like, you know, and I mean
Just
in
let my meme deck live, please.
where's I gotta
Leave it
find
alone.
Machine Dramon now. BT no EX1 duh. Cause reading the card again, I have Machine Dramon still built. It's still sitting there.
I think
Yeah,
like this is the part where we have to start thinking about being creative because it's like we already know what the top decks are gonna be.
they just
It's
need
not
to
hard to
print another
figure it out.
Machine Dramon by now. If you want Machine Dramon to be good, you need a new Machine Dramon because the current one just already has too many ways that okay, it can't its DP can't be reduced. That's cool. Who cares? And then
Oh, that's just good against yellow. So like if
when
yellow's
it's
too much of a problem, you could try it.
when this Digimon would be deleted. Okay, so cause even like old cards get around this Kikaitis breath. Like
I mean, bounce effects, yes.
yeah,
It's still awful in the blue, but it still is very good against literally everything else. Like it's always had a bad blue matchup just because
blue's
of
50%
blue.
of the meta.
I mean, yes.
Was it
I'm
like
just saying, like that's what's keeping it like really from doing
uh,
as well as it could
I
be. I
I think
almost was
I think
I
Machine
almost should
Dramon
have
would
played Machine
lose.
Dramon instead.
I think Machine Dramon would have loses to a lot of like bad decks. I'm sorry, man. I'm not gonna sit here and defend Machine Dramon. Like I can't in all honesty. Machine Dramon loses to Diaboromon. Machine Dramon loses to um
Well,
probably
I mean, it's slowly, like I said, it's slowly getting the pieces to be good, but like you said, it's a little bit too
that's what
late.
they like I said. Like I
It's
think
like Kudamon coming out for Kentorosmon
hmm
like 3 sets later. It's like, wow, where
yeah
was this 3 sets
yeah nobody
ago
plays
when
this
he
card
actually
anymore. Who
needed it?
cares? Like
Right.
I mean, what they needed really was a Machine Dramon Jogress deck, period, or
He's not
like
really a Jagras though.
I mean, or a Machine Dramon um Digicross.
I
Like
mean, yeah,
if I can just slam, I mean he is Digicross, but not Digicross. Like if I could just slam
he's
Machine
a
Dramon,
precursor to it.
um, but see, like cause wordings are very relevant. Cause we already have cards printed now, like Psychomon. If anyone cares to play like actual purple, you cannot reduce play costs. Machine Dramon can't be fucking played.
Well,
Oops.
I mean, by that logic, it shuts out if Bellastarmon, and yet Bellastarmon keeps topping or sneaking into the top
That's
eight
because the
every
only
single
thing that can
time.
beat Bellastarmon is Bellastarmon, and you're never gonna play that mirror because only 3 people play the deck.
Well, I mean, it's still a very strong deck. Like, don't get me wrong,
Oh yeah,
it's
it's
really good into yellow
especially into
hybrids
yellow
because
hybrid,
it's a
yes.
like,
But
and that's part of the tech of like what we're trying to figure out is where do certain decks fall in the meta. It's just like
but
Bellastarmon probably has some really bad matchups. It has an especially bad matchup in Black X Antibody,
mhm.
but it beats Yellow Hybrid. And if they're going to see more Yellow Hybrid than Black X Antibody, I'd still take that deck.
So I
And
think
Machinedramon kind of
Bellastarmon.
is in that camp too,
Oh, it's
just
not.
not as good
I'm
as
sorry,
yeah.
man. It's not.
It's just not as good as Bellastarmon as an
It's
example. Like
okay, yeah.
Bellastarmon's toolbox engine is just absolutely
If
insane
you play
on
against
being
an
able to remove a
upgraded
lot.
yellow starter deck, you're gonna win. But like Machine Dramon's just like
He's not as bad as people think. It's just he's just lacking the tools and he's getting them
he's lacking the
one
yeah
little too late.
yeah he's like fucking 3 screws
But
loose.
he's not bad.
it,
I can
you
okay.
can't you can't
You
say it.
play yellow hybrid. Yes, I can. You play me against yellow hybrid, and I will beat you with Machine Dramon. I will just
Okay,
do that.
okay,
I'm not
that's
saying right
fair.
this very second,
I
but
know,
I
but
will beat you with Machine Dramon. The fact that you can't reduce my DP and I can make my Machine Dramon a larger body than you could just swing over will just auto win me that matchup. On top of the fact that I could stack them with whatever I want towards the mid to late stages of the game.
I probably would just have to play yellow hybrid like blue hybrid. I would just swing with level 4s.
I mean, you'd
Um,
have to play that very aggressively, very early, and I don't know if Yellow Hybrids has that ability to.
but like, and I mean, and so it back to I guess the greater point that I was saying is I think Yellow Hybrid actually already is seeing such a pincher point uh of focus of counterplay of things that can't be DP reduced. You know, Breath of the Gods, you know, a couple of the various Black X antibody cards, um, if Shinjamon, I guess, uh, and and all you have to do is swap. Like I said, you swap out a couple pieces, and instead of running Wyvern's Breath as your big boy kill card, you play Chaos Degradation. That no longer you no longer lose that matchup. You no longer get pincered in that way because if I just swap out again a single Wyvern's Breath for Chaos Degradation in that matchup, because I think at one point I was sitting on two of them in hand, among with like I think two or three Eden's Javelins, which also did nothing. Um, then it's just a very different game because they do invest so much into that singular stack that if you can remove it, you do win the game.
I mean, I'm not saying that's not the case,
Yeah.
but like that's the type of stuff that like how metas develop is
Mhm.
like okay, obviously nobody was prepared like even in the events that did have starter decks legal, they still weren't really playing chaos degradation because it just wasn't a thing that they needed to,
Yeah.
play. And now as we're starting to get into the tech phase of the meta where it's just like okay,
We're
yellow
moving
hybrids is the
beyond.
deck we have to
Yeah.
beat.
Yep.
How do we beat that? DP reduction, cool. Now Yellow Hybrids is like, shoot, we're starting to lose to us running our DP reduction.
Yeah.
Let's start running not DP reduction and see
Yep.
what happens.
Yeah. There were a decent amount of times where those cards were dead in hand. Um, against blue hybrids at least too, especially. Not necessarily dead in hand because they couldn't kill anything, but I mean, I don't want to spend 6 memory for Eden's Javelin, even if it cycles a card and kills a body, if I'm gonna have to kill a Bokamon or um a Madoki Betamon. Like just because I don't have I'm not gonna Rapidmon, right now
No, I
or
think you
one
rapid
body.
bomb that.
Yeah, you probably do Rapidmon two bodies,
I
but
think
one body, what do you do then?
I mean you just let that one body go. Like if
But what do
you
I
either
spend my
rapid
turn
bomb or
on?
you wait.
That's what I mean. What do I spend my turn
Playing
on
another
then?
tamer. Playing
I
another
don't
tamer.
have one. That's
Get
what I
one.
mean. Well, you like against blue hybrid, my hand was at one point like 6 Edens, Wyverns, 7.
I mean,
You
at
know?
that point, like if you're using Eden, like you're just using Eden more for the cycle rather than the actual like
Yeah.
effective Edens, just to
Mhm.
try to dig in through your deck deeper. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think Edens is like the answer. It's just one of the better
Well,
cards right now to get them through something that deals with a lot of potential
I'm
problems.
a big fan of Eden's Javelin, throwing all the way back to playing the very early iterations of security control when it was basically just a bunch of kill cards and then security Digimon. Um, I like it was called like Rainbow Control or Rainbow Security. It wasn't Security Control. It was like something like that because it was running red, purple, blue,
No, I know what
yellow.
you're talking
Yeah,
about. That deck was like weird and jank.
it was Megazoo slash Security Control slash just a bunch of Security Digimon. It was not a good deck at all. I saw like a list on Reddit, either YouTube, and I was like, this looks fun. It played with the security mechanic in a very interesting way. But Eden's is I think a really good card to answer the meta, but not just answer the meta because um Imperial Dramon, as we mentioned, if you can limit their ability to Jogress and to do crazy Jogress things, um that's how you beat them with Yellow Hybrid. And Eden's is that perfect midpoint where I will perfectly happily Eden's a level 4 of Imperial, or better case scenario, a Paildramon. If for whatever reason um, I don't necessarily think it's a good turn for them. I don't think they put themselves in that position, but if they're running the end of turn Jogress card, you slam a Stingmon, end of turn Jogress into Pyildramon. I just
Oh,
Eden's
you never
Pyildramon.
do that.
I know,
Yeah,
but
you never do that as Imperial. If you are DNAing, you are DNAing that
four
turn.
extra attacks. Yeah.
Yes, you like there is zero reason why you're ever ending your turn
I don't
on
even think they run Wormmon
DNAing.
anyway, so
No, the majority of them don't. You could if you
that's
wanted to,
more
if you're
like
thinking
starter
about
deck budgety based. Running more of the starter
yeah,
deck cards than less of them.
or various other tech. So like it's really good with I mean, but at that point you're just better off playing Patamon. But I digress. Like it's you're not ending your turn Jogras. You're ending your turn doing other
Hmm.
things.
Well, I guess more so, Eden's is also there at a 4 of, and with the amount of recovery in the deck that you're decently likely to hit an Eden's Insecurity, and pretty much every game I've had, it doesn't take very long for me to have at least 8 cards in hand, especially with the additional card from the security draw. So I can kill a Pyildramon with an Eden's Insecurity most often, which is
Yeah,
the
but
reason
then
which is the reason you run it.
right, but then now you're running into the issue where it's just like, okay, let's start running in anti DP reduction. Let's see how Eden's does. Now Eden's is a dead card.
Yes.
Congratulations. Now you have to think of something
Mhm.
else. You swap out of that into something else. Now other decks are now better into it because you're not running Eden's.
I
Like
mean, yeah.
it's there is no perfect answer to solving the meta in terms of like the tech choices and changes. Like you can't just have this all encompassing forever deck that just handles literally everything. It just does not exist.
No. Um yeah, it's definitely not easy. Um
And that's why like other decks can like sneak in. It's just like, okay, even though Black War Greymon hasn't really done very well, he's a deck that could still potentially sneak in stuff just because of the mechanics he's playing around with. He's really slow, don't get me wrong, but like
I don't
Yellow
think he's
Hybrids is
really
gonna be
slow.
just
I
as
don't think
slow.
he's that
Oh,
slow.
he's slow until you have your tamer set up. Like
I
without
mean,
Nokia, he is painful.
yeah, you
Like
kind
you
of need a
almost want
Nokia, but the whole point of Nokia is that it is a tempo turn. You're playing Nokia for 3, which lets you play a rookie for 3, which usually does something.
it'll
I
search most of the time.
Yeah, it'll search. Um but yeah, uh I still think not Black Worker, Metal Greymon, EBT8 Metal Greymon is still probably the best level 5 in the meta right now.
Oh, that
Um
card is so good. That card is so
I
good.
I would cuz I was like be like maybe still Jet Sylphie, but Metal Greymon's pretty good, and also like it's kind of like a little bit of a crutch on right now for Black War Greymon is that if they don't see their Metal Greymon, then or that Metal Greymon, the BT8 Metal Greymon, then they kind of have a pretty shitty Black War Greymon stack comparatively, and they kind of they only get one stack usually before they lose.
So
So
like after like thinking really hard about War Greymon, it's just like I do think the optimal level 8 lineup is literally 4 Chimeras and 4 BT8 Metal Greys. Like
really,
as much as I want to run, yes, as much as I want to run the classic collection Metal Grey, I don't think he's good in the meta. I he's just not. Like piercing into armor does absolutely nothing because the Digimon didn't get deleted.
yeah,
Your Digimon doesn't restand because the Digimon didn't get deleted. Like and armor is going to be a huge factor into events because of its prevalence. Like a lot of what we're talking about playability wise is one aspect of the meta. Another aspect is accessibility. Armor rush decks are very accessible.
mm,
Like that's just going to be a huge factor into what we're going to be seeing. It might not always be the best because yellow hybrids exists to just have rapid bond to just clean up shop, but for a common Joe Schmo who only bought like maybe 2 booster boxes, he could very easily build a armor rush deck of some sort.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I guess it depends on to what extent are we discussing, right? Because I know we've we've kind of stated to ourselves a little bit that like our goal is to talk about like tournaments and potential top tables of those tournaments because I literally think I played against Joe Schmo, maybe by name, in this last event. Uh, I've never beat someone so bad. I felt bad. He didn't play the game, you know? Um, it was one of my 3 wins that I had. And like I said, I was just apologizing the whole time. Like, he played a he played a Magnamon, think he got it up to 12k. Wyvern's Breath. Next. Like, like giving
I
them a
mean,
lot of memory never mattered because all he could do was just slam Vmon and pass, and then they like none of them could attack. He could
I
only
mean, if you
raise.
want, yeah, if you want true hardcore meta, like I think I did a pretty good job on my tier list where it's just like the meta is basically going to be hybrids, Mastimon, Imperial, blue hybrids, or yellow hybrids, Mastimon, Imperial, blue hybrids, um, X antibody, Bellastar, Armor Rush, and Black War. I think that's just what is going to be the majority of what you see. And as far as like miscellaneous decks, you're gonna have like a whole bunch of miscellaneous decks. It's gonna be a wild, wild west.
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
red hybrids is still really good. There's still a spot for green hybrids that's pretty unexplored because Shivamon's also a really good card into yellow hybrids.
hmm
Like, turn off your options, burn your security for literally doing nothing is just good against slow control decks.
yeah. Um, I well, so
It's
it
bad against everything else, but it's
well
really
that
good into slow
I
control decks.
well the thing is that like we don't we no longer live in a world now that card is over where the meta is only slow control decks. And I think that's why all these decks that you keep bringing up, I think they're going to get scared away. I don't think it's worth. I mean, I don't think there are enough players like myself where I chose to run an off meta worse tier 1.5, probably closer to tier 2 deck because I would rather beat the one tier 1 deck that I care about beating and lose to everything else. I don't think enough people care about that, and I think, especially given, maybe we'll see some different results this weekend with the North American events that have starter decks legal, but Imperial was still twice as large as Yellow Hybrid. I guess not
Part of it is
exactly twice as
accessibility.
large.
Yeah.
Yes, but
Part
well,
of it is like I said, it comes down
accessibility.
to
But
accessibility.
if you're gonna be accessible, you're gonna have access to a better like why play Armor Rush when you can buy a starter deck and have 80% of a tier one potentially the best deck. You know,
Because it has different matchups. Like it's more favored against certain other matchups than Imperial actually.
but well, I guess so. Under the same reasoning though is why I'm saying that like I don't think you're gonna see people taking these decks that you're saying that do really well in the yellow hybrid, but just get run over by Imperial because they're just gonna get run over by Imperial. They're not gonna see yellow hybrid as much unless they
Well, I mean,
tie.
that's why I labeled like that's why in my tier list video I labeled the meta. Like those are just the decks you are going to see. Period. If you're seeing anything else but those decks, those are basically your rogue decks.
All
Those are
you
your
have to
offbeat
do
decks.
is if you want to play Shiva control and really tune it to beat yellow hybrid, you have to guarantee that you tie game round one. If you tie round one, then you'll play only yellow hybrid and you'll be fine.
I mean, I think it's not like awful into various other decks. Like against Belistar, it's probably okay. Into Mastimon, it's also probably okay. Okay, maybe not Mastimon. I lied. Um,
It
Yeah,
loses
it's
to
mostly just
Imperial.
Belistar. I mean, it loses to faster. Well, I mean, you could go up the chain really, really fast. So, like, it really just depends on you as a pilot knowing how Shivamon plays against other decks. I'm not a Shivamon player. I can't speak for that experience. I just know on pen and paper, it does beat slower control decks that are option heavy, or if they just can't get rid of Shivamon, then they're just going to have a bad day. And certain decks just can't. Like, blue hybrid, as an example, they have nothing against it. Shivamon would just actually run them over.
You go
Like
around it.
you would have to try to go around it, and then they use like a
You
hybrid
strip and
package or
stun
something
Shivamon.
else.
We,
Yeah,
we,
but
we
then they
literally
use
played
like
that matchup.
Digisorption. No, I mean you play Digisorption, suspend the Shivamon that is currently stunned, and
hmm
now he's still burning you, locks you out of your options, and I'm still progressing my game plan as a Shivamon. Like
Yeah,
a true Shivamon deck isn't as bad as some people think. It's not great. It does have really bad aggro matchups, but like against certain other matchups, it's really good.
It it did have
And
positive
that's what makes it
results.
Rogue.
It had positive results. Well, like so yes, I think that our definitions of rogue are potentially a little different. Rogue to me means you win on either surprise, like I don't know what this deck's supposed to do. I don't know how it wins, therefore I lose. Like honestly, I guess the only
Oh,
example that I
there's like almost none of that in Digimon.
that's
Almost
because there's not
everything is
enough cards.
expected.
Well, that's what I mean. Like I can think of a couple decks that honestly I couldn't tell you their win con. Uh, Dark Knightmon, Mamamon,
Aggro.
um,
Dark Knightmon is an aggro deck. Mamimon is also an aggro deck.
Mamamon's an aggro deck that plays a 9 cost option card.
Yes.
Okay.
So like you're not really trying to play that option card. With a little bit of experience with the Mamimon deck and just sticking around with it, you're not really trying to play that option card. What you're trying to do is play like this aggro tempo style of game. Fill up your trash with a couple of Mamimons, use catch Mamimon to rake the top of your deck, go into Bancho to line up your Bancho with the catch, and then just start swinging with the Bancho that you basically guarantee playing more Digimon off the top. You only run a high amount of the option to hope it gets tripped up in security to just get free Digimon out of nowhere. And the fact that you could pull out like potentially 2 Digimon off the top is what makes you more of an aggro deck. It's just like, oh, shoot, I have 2 bodies now I have to deal with, and my dude potentially dies. Oops.
Well, in that 30-second explanation, I would now not consider either of them rogue decks because I know what they do. But so the other definition of rogue deck is just you have to have like everything go right and your opponent have a decent amount go wrong for you to win. That's not a position I would like to put myself in as a card game player where it's like, man, if I play against Blue Hybrid and he never draws a tamer, I'm a win.
Yeah, my definition of rogue is definitely vastly different than yours because my definition of rogue is basically like anything that's not like known hyper meta. It's really good against some matches, but against the vast majority of the board, it's not hyper positive. Like that's usually my definition of rogue.
That's
So like
why I
these decks can
ran.
do well. It's just against everything, they're gonna lose the majority of the time if they literally just pick one by one what they win and what they lose against.
And I don't know, because I would never recommend anyone play any of those decks where if you roll a 6-sided die, 5 out of 6 times you lose. Why play that deck?
Because it supposedly beats the top deck, like the big dog. Like if yellow hybrid is the big dog, and
I
you're
don't think it
expected to
is.
see 9 yellow hybrids in a row, I think Shivamon is a really good deck to go into it. I also think Machine Germon's a really good deck to go into it. I also think a lot of other decks are really good into it. It's just the problem is that's not going to happen very often, and you are going to get like the Imperials, the Mastemons, the X antibodies, and sometimes those decks will just hard clean your clock.
I gotta find it now because I think there is an example here. Um, oh wait, no. Okay, sweet. Metagame. Uh, E regionals. Green Shivamon. Um, well, this person only played 3 rounds. Um, okay, so this person went 6-3. They lost to Imperial, Masty. They beat Armor Rush, Machine Germon, Blue Hybrid, lost to Armor Rush, beat Black War Greymon, and then beat an Imperial Germon. So they had a 50% win rate versus a Tier 1 deck, and then they beat not Tier 1 decks. They finished 6-3. Um,
I mean, that's not like
the
awful. I mean, they didn't
other
see any yellow
person,
hybrids.
the other person beat Blue Green Imperial, beat Yellow Masty, lost to Yellow Hybrid, beat Blue Hybrid, lost to Armor Rush, beat Yellow Shine Greymon, excuse me, then
It's
beat
just
Blue
yellow
Hybrid,
hybrid.
then yeah, I guess it's Yellow Hybrid that actually still runs Shine Greymon, which they're wrong for. Um, then they beat Blue Hybrid, then they lost to Yellow Hybrid, then they beat Imperial. So I guess yeah, the two best represented Shivamon just as long as you don't play Yellow Hybrid, you're fine because they lose to Yellow Hybrid as shown by
Which
this
is
data.
I mean, I don't know. Like I don't want to say it's a small sample size, but it's one event.
Mm,
Granted, like we didn't. I'm actually surprised we didn't see more Shivamon. Considering it's still pretty good against Blue Hybrid, and that was a very like
actually,
heavy showing. And without Imperial, it actually is even better because it has a hard Imperial matchup.
so again,
So I'm surprised people didn't bring Green Shiva.
there
Wow.
were only
Okay.
a couple people that played Green Shiva in that event. I think six total. Um,
Yeah, I think it just has a low meta representation, so it's just like you have to be a really good Green Shivamon player if you're going to bring Green Shivamon. Otherwise, yeah, you
because
probably are just better
so
off bringing
Green
something
Shivamon in
else.
the event had a 0% win rate versus Yellow Rapidmon Hybrid, 0-2. They then had a 33% win rate versus Mastamon, 1-2. And then they had a 50% win rate versus Yellow Purple Hybrid, 1-1. They lost to Yellow. Fucking whole ass. They lose to Yellow. Their
I'm
biggest win rates
surprised.
were versus not tier 1 decks. Even they lost to every tier 1 deck, which kind of I guess is the definition of rogue, right? You lose to all the tier 1 decks and then you beat everybody else sometimes because they also lost to BL Star and X Antibody and Armor Rush a little bit. So Green Shiva is good if you don't play any tier 1 deck, but I would again never recommend that to someone. So, um we talked a little bit less about X Antibody than I wanted to, but I mean we mentioned it in reference to other decks. X Antibody is I think a deck that when taken in its completely like cookie cutter form isn't as good as it could be. Just like
No,
I don't
you have to tech it.
well I I the I think the cookie cutter is teched. The cookie cutter is at least teched for the yellow hybrid matchup because you make one big stack and you cannot afford to get Rapidmon down. You cannot afford to, like when we played, I Rapidmon Wyvern's Breath to your stack because I
Yeah,
needed
but
to.
I actually wasn't playing Cookie Cutter. I didn't
I
have
would
the
say
Breath
to
of the
cookie
Gods in.
cutter is Breath of the Gods at this point. But
At this point, yeah.
so
But I didn't put it in
but I
because
still think
I
that
didn't have it at that moment.
there's some like changes to be made. I think you have to commit a little harder to one evolution line than they thought previously. You can't just hand jam in both the Oryu line and the Doru Gray line and expect it to be completely congruent. Because as I found when I was playtesting it leading up to the event, potentially going to play that deck, like just the lines of play with if you have the wrong level 5 with the wrong level 6, it feels bad. Like you need Yuji for it to function, and if you just don't have a Yuji for some reason, then Hisaryu feels really bad. Um, and Orayumon feels pretty bad if
No,
you.
Oreo, you need to keep adding stuff under the stack, and the only way he could do that is Yuji, so that way he basically makes himself indestructible. TLDR, Yuji is good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but so that's what like. I think the default like cookie cutter ratios of like 3-2-3 is potentially wrong. Um, I think you probably have to commit to one or the other. Um, I mean, I've seen
No, at that
lists.
point, you just go 4-4. Well, the reason why you splash in Alphamon is like for those fringe instances where you have Alpha Oreo combo,
Well,
and
I
then you just
think.
combo off.
Well,
And Alphamon's not like awful in security either.
I was gonna say the
Like
other way
that's
around because I think like you can either. Well, so 4-4 is fine, I guess, if you're committing to the Doru Gray line as your primary mega. Um, but I think because I saw a list that was 4-3 and it was 4 Oryu, 3 Alpha, no Doru Gray.
I
And I,
mean, Doru Gray isn't really needed. Like he's just extra removal, and he's an easy way to build up your own stack and make him really really large. But if you are going like full Oryu alpha combo, then do it. Like there's basically three different ways you build the deck. You either build the deck Oryu, sit on Oryu, and make him indestructible. You build the deck at alpha and go Oryu alpha combo, or you go Doru and you just sit on Doru and just try to use Doru for max value.
For last event, I was leaning towards Doru, mostly because if Yellow Hybrid is the only answer to X Antibody, basically, really, at the moment, minus the starter X, then um, if you just made a tall enough body that had blocker, reboot, and couldn't be DP reduced, you just win the game. And being on the other end of that, it's definitely true that if they just make a big body that has blocker, reboot, and can't be DP reduced, you have no answer to that at all in a pure yellow hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, so like to like try to bring things full circle, Yellow Hybrid is the boogeyman of the format.
Yep,
That is
I think it's the deck
without a
everyone
shadow
loves
of
to
a doubt.
hate. You need
Well,
to tech
because it's
against it.
toxic and it's cancerous. Yeah, it's toxic, it's cancerous, it's a deck that really
Uh,
shouldn't exist.
I don't know what's I mean, toxic and cancerous. I wouldn't say it as much so. It's a control deck. It
It's a very annoying
it's
control
not a
deck, and I
control
hate
deck that's
control.
trying to kill you in security. Step one. It's not. I'm not sitting there on three. You know, I, I'm
No, it's
I'm not running six different cards that just kill you outright in security.
I mean, you
It's
kind of are
the
between
tempo's
the
more.
4 Edens and the
Well,
3
that's because you're swinging with Pyldramon. That's
Wyvern's
your
Breath.
fault. I think
No,
it's
then you're
equally.
killing me with security then.
I think it's equally cancerous that you can swing 4 times with a level 5. Not
I'm
four
not
times
saying
with
it's
one level,
not,
but
but like it's a byproduct of like, okay, you could recover twice in a single turn, you're at 7 security and can continue to recover and like indefinitely, making yourself basically unkillable. Cool, we need to shove ways to kill you.
yeah,
So
I
like it's just a byproduct. Like yellow hybrids is so toxic that it is actually warping how Digimon is kind of played
it's
in
just a
a minute sense.
it's just a control deck. It's more of a pure control deck that
It's more than a control deck.
well
It's
well it's not
awful.
a stall deck anymore. At least as much it doesn't have to be. It
It's
can be played that way. Um but it doesn't have to
like
be.
part of the problem is just how hybrids play. Part of the problem is just yellow itself. Like there's a reason why people don't like that deck or at least playing into it. It is just not a fun experience. And I faced my fair share of yellow hybrid to know it's a very miserable matchup. Like you have to pray your opponent's security is awful and you have enough attacks lined up in order to think about winning. It's terrible.
Well, what it's not security control. What's the worst case scenario in my security? You get a wyvern's breath. Okay, I killed
Susano
one.
Wyvern's Breath, yes.
I hit. Okay, so you can hit Susano. It's just a big body. I could Susano. You could swing in with your Azulong and you die, or you swing in with fucking Madoki and you die.
Well,
That's a coin flip that you take.
even last format, it was just trying to figure out how to actually win games, and it was having a hard time doing that.
Well,
So
that's the
what did it do? It
yeah.
just basically relied on its security to win games and try to grind the opponent out.
Well, that's the
It's still
difference.
doing something very similar. It's just less so because Rapid Bond makes it more aggressive. You don't need to rely on TK Kari to gain you a butt ton of memory because Rapid Bond makes you more aggressive. Like
Well, that's
the
the
deck
point
did
though.
change to be a little bit more aggressive, but like it's still a very toxic and not fun
I
experience.
think the largest the difference being is that I no longer need you to give me a bunch of memory. I can do it myself, which is less toxic, less stally, you know, like blue hybrids. Blue hybrids doesn't like again, if we lived in a world where if blue hybrid could only have their dual tamer gain the additional memory from no sources by me hard playing Digimon, I think that's toxic. But you have the control tools of your own to manipulate that situation and put me in a place where I you you give
It's
yourself that
not so
memory.
much the it's not so much the rapid mount part that is like the problem to yellow hybrids. It is the actual yellow hybrids that is the problem to yellow hybrids. Like going from literally nothing on field but a tamer all the way up to a mega in a single turn and recovering to drawing potentially 3 cards, like it's incredibly dumb, on top of like just all of the other efficiencies and like control power that yellow has, it is incredibly stupid.
But so because I think while you don't want to be completely unafraid of the security. I think people are more afraid of the security than necessary sometimes. I mean, depending upon
I'm
what
not
deck
going to
you're playing.
disagree with that, but like
Because
at the same time, you still run a higher amount of security threats than your average deck, and just hitting in security, tripping a
eh,
tamer puts you literally ahead of the opponent because now you're starting to gain resources and advantages you didn't have before.
I mean, I
If they
wouldn't
don't kill you,
I wouldn't
which is
necessarily
why in
compare
BT9 they're trying to kill you more.
I wouldn't compare myself directly with um I guess comparing yellow hybrid to blue hybrid from last format's a bad example because blue hybrid last format was toxic. So, um but
Well, that's because there was nothing to do with like stripping
hitting
stun.
hitting a hammer spark in security is equally detrimental to hitting an Eden's Javelin or a Wyvern's Breath.
Yeah, but you're running less of those in blue
Are you
hybrids.
though? It's
Yes.
I'm running 7. So you run 5, I run 7. I run 2 more than you do. Of cards that you don't want to hit in security that'll kill you. And that's assuming that Eden's kills something, which it technically usually doesn't. The next check will kill you because now you're smaller and you're going to hit like a 6k body and die. But
Well, yellow hybrid's tamer quality is also insanely high.
yes,
Like
I
it
wouldn't
is
argue that.
it
But now because yellow hybrid isn't relying, I think the yellow hybrids that relies on TK and Kari to give us memory every turn is toxic because it forces me to not play the game and forces you to be punished for playing the game. That's toxic. I agree with that.
yes.
Cody solves that problem, and it only gets better as we move forward. You know, the tamer quality just continues to go up, and I will get more memory for playing the game.
Yeah, which is why it's part of the problem. Like just like part of it is tamers, part of it is just the yellow hybrids themselves. Like yellow hybrids is de facto the best hybrids. Even though blue has more hybrids, it's just that
Well, yeah,
they
now.
rely more heavily on specific synergies yellow doesn't.
Hmm.
Yellow's just like, oh, I'm just going to recover, 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 and then just chip away. Blue hybrids need specific synergies in order to like work. Yellow doesn't. Blue hybrids also doesn't have access to certain things that yellow hybrids do. Um, like their high level of tamers. Like their tamer quality is insanely high.
Mm.
And like you said, it only gets better, which is not helping yellow hybrids' case.
Well,
Because it feels like the game is warping around yellow hybrids, and that's not necessarily like I don't necessarily think that's super healthy.
so I mean, Yellow Hybrids is obviously a lot better now than I thought it was. It was completely off my radar going into BT8 until I picked it up, looked at what it was doing, and played with it myself. So I am a fan of control as a concept, but control where control is in the player's hands. So Digimon has fewer ways to interact than other card games. I cannot affect you outside of my own security on your turn outside of a few edge case tamers. So, that being said, it's as control as the game allows within the confines of its rules. Now,
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with
yeah,
that.
I know. It just,
It's just we already have like Digimon already has lots of control, lots of removal. Like usually I go into a lot of my turns as a more aggressive player expecting my Digimon never to live.
yeah,
Like that feels very
but,
bad.
well, it it's because we also live in a world where your small bodies hit, like outside of security pluses, which again are not as prevalent really as they potentially should be, but we live in a world where your Madoki Betamon and your fucking
I'm not even
Hexablaumon,
talking about Boom.
your Hexablaumon swing for the same security. They both check 1. That's 1 life out of 5. That's a lot. I think that's also warping the system that we're in where yes, I'm recovering constantly and you feel like my security is endless. Well, I mean, if you really count it, I can only recover 6 times outside of Salamon. But if I'm recovering with Salamon, something else has kind of gone wrong because that means that like Rapidmon's died. So you have to deal with 11 security over double. If I see every level 5, if I don't get a single level 5 insecurity that I can't retrieve, if I see every Ophanimon and play it, um, and I recover 7 or 4, 5, no 6 on top of the normal 5, and that's it. Also, I run 12 Tamers. Those don't kill you in
Yeah, but not
security.
not everyone has the ability to do that because of like you always constantly killing their Digimon. It's just like, yes, my Digimon breaks one security and then goes away forever. Now I lost that resource where you have less security to break through, stickier and stronger bodies that are constantly healing you. Like that's why Yellow Hybrids is doing as well as it is because it just literally edges over the opponent because of the recovery, because of the speed, because of the tech and tools that it's working with. It is just significantly better than most other things.
I don't know. I mean, I actually have 0 playtesting with or against Imperial Dramon. And I think Imperial Dramon keeps up. Yellow has
Well,
yellow.
because they had to make something that has to.
Well,
Like, that's why in BT9, everything is OTK because yellow hybrids and recovery and just security as a whole is like not super fun. So they just want to
well,
break through it all
well.
in
So
one go
let's
to try to deal with that.
let's be honest here. Let's dial back a little bit. Yellow hybrids was technically hit the hardest, but it was also technically untouched completely by the ban list because it wasn't a problem. You know, it nobody cared. Yellow
No,
hybrids was
everyone
good with
cared.
Susanoo.
Everyone was calling Jet Sylphie to get banned.
True. I think Jet Sylphie could have been
Jet
restricted,
Sylphie's incredibly dumb.
but it didn't because they didn't feel like it was necessary, and here we are.
Well,
Whereas
I mean, just
Ice
looking
Wall got
ahead.
hit, fucking Savior got hit, MDF got banned, Eismon got hit, and Jet Sylphie stands tall, untouched, because they didn't think they needed to.
Yeah, and here we are in BT10 in Japan land, and Yellow Hybrids is, spoiler,
Good,
still a
good
problem.
again. It doesn't exist in BT9. It goes away.
No, it still does. No, it still does. You look at Japanese reports, it still exists. It is still a deck. Does it have less meta representation because
You still
BT9 is
think
more of an
Machine Dramon's a
OTK?
deck? We can't talk anymore.
You're right. All right, guys.
It's
Takeaway
okay.
is Yellow Hybrids is toxic and cancerous. Have a good night.
Yeah. Oh, it's okay. No. Yeah. We don't have to agree on everything. That's never the point of this. Um. And it it really depends. Obviously, like I'll sit here and I can claim that yellow hybrids isn't a problem because it doesn't get touched, and they could come out tomorrow and say Jet Sylphie's banned, and I'd be like, you know what? That's okay, and I play something else. But um, so we live in a world where yellow hybrids is what it is. It's probably like the boogeyman because of how it mentally breaks down your opponent without you having to do anything except for recover two, and then we'll see. Um, I do think at least I'm hopeful that yellow hybrids doesn't become the problem that blue hybrids was, because
Oh, it's
while
way worse. It's way worse.
well, I think that yellow hybrids doesn't have the same problem that blue hybrids had, or it has a problem that blue hybrids didn't have, in
Well,
that
because blue hybrids had a mechanic that you actually can interact with. They had to create a card specific one card specifically that says you can't recover, and you just wait a turn until the card is gone. Like to get out of blue hybrids, you jogress. You use your Digimon for other things. Like there's ways to get around blue hybrids mechanic to stun lock the opponent's
well,
Digimon. And like they keep harping back to stun locking the opponent's Digimon for certain forms of blue control, and it has some varying degrees of success, but there's still a way out of it. There's zero ways out of me like attacking into your security, you recovering. There's
Hmm.
zero I can do about that.
Well,
You could still play around blue hybrids. You can't play around yellow hybrids.
what I was gonna say was that something blue hybrids never struggled with is if blue hybrids when blue hybrids was the best deck unequivocally. After a couple rounds, we kept trying to believe that maybe there's a deck that'll beat it. Maybe there's a deck that, even though it may like have losing matchups to other, the meta was so warped towards blue hybrid that as long as you could beat blue hybrid, it didn't matter if you lost everything else because you only played against blue hybrid basically the whole tournament. That still never happened. The best thing to play into blue hybrid was blue hybrid, and they were playing their own game basically for a little while. But something they never had to deal with when they were unequivocally the best deck, if Yellow Hybrid is that deck now, as you claim it may be, then they weren't tying. And if you tie, you lose. So, like,
Oh, the ties, don't even get me started about the ties. Like, part
so,
of it is like the deck is just inherently slow and it actively slows down the game because it's stalling out the game just because recovery stalls games. It's not trying to do that. Like,
hmm
it just is a byproduct of the mechanic. It's like, oh, now I have to work harder to be able to kill you, which then slows down the pace of the game. Like, part of it is also player analysis. Like, moves and plays just got more complicated to where it requires more thought. So more thought means more time to put into your turns, so that way you could try to minimize whatever risks you could possibly minimize. So like ties are actually awful, and yellow hybrid is the king pinnacle apex of ties, and I hate it. I hate
well,
it.
that's what I mean. So, if I think Yellow Hybrid hits that point of, like, where they fall below like the like rate of replacement, so to speak, where now if yellow hybrid, let's say yellow hybrid becomes 50% of the meta, you flip a coin, you're either going to play yellow hybrid or anything else. The problem is all the yellow hybrids are going to coin flip, and everyone that loses that coin flip is going to play themselves and tie. And when you tie, you've essentially lost. You're out of the running for first place now, and
Except
you
for the
can
few yellow
only
hybrids
you can
except for the
continue
few
to
yellow
flip their
hybrids that
coin and
sneak
win,
by.
yeah. Like, eventually you'll once
Well, part of the problem is representation. So like in Carta, as we saw, there was an overabundance representation of yellow hybrids.
Mhm.
It was so rampant to the part where it ended the whole tournament 2 rounds early because of how many draws were in that tournament, especially at top tables, because yellow hybrids kept doing so well.
I blame Canada for that. If I don't, because I think Imperial solves that problem. At least
It
it
helps
solves the
with that
problem
problem.
of yellow versus blue Imperial shouldn't ever tie. It, like, regardless of who's winning, it's not tying. You know, I mean, obviously any
It'll be a best
match,
of one, yeah, but
yeah.
regardless.
So
And that's why sideboards aren't a thing, is because yellow hybrids make best of one. So who needs to run a sideboard when you're only playing 1 round or 1 match?
true, but yep, there's a lot to be said about BT8. We'll definitely have more to say once we actually get more full North American data and not just this. Um, like I said, I want to say I'm hopeful in that Yellow just doesn't run away with this format. I really want a format where there isn't one just best deck by that much of a margin. And I think I I thought Imperial was positioned to be that deck, and we'll see because still numerically, based on the European data, it looks like Imperial is that deck. Now, maybe North American players flip that script and say, haha, you EU boys don't know what you're talking about. Yellow hybrids is the way to go, and we'll prove you wrong. But without actual data,
I'm
we don't
I'm
know.
actually I'm actually confident that's what's going to happen for America,
So
or yeah,
we'll see.
for North America.
We will
That's
have to
probably what's going
see.
to happen.
Those of you that have stuck around this long, I thank you. This was a little bit longer than normal, but I guess if you're listening to the end, you actually care what we have to say. So, um, with that, I think we'll close it out. Goodbye.
Yep, later.